concern. It's rolling? Okay, good evening. Loyalists. There are loyalists that are here, there are loyalists that are online. In New York City, for those listening in New Zealand or anywhere else in the world, there's a great blizzard going on right now outside. But we are here in a consistent way, neither snow, nor rain, nor blizzards, nor hail, nor any other impediments can stop us, the forward progress, march of progress of mankind into the future. Okay? And so, tonight's topic, which by the way was determined many months ago, because some people thought it was connected to the events of this week, is called Holy Thieves. Holy Thieves, transforming mistakes into Mitzvot. And the reason I chose this topic is based on a verse in this week's chapter, which we shall begin with. I'll get to it in a moment, but I want to first amplify on this question. Because one of the big questions we all have, of course, is no one on earth that has not made a mistake in their life. Would you agree? Good. Mistakes of our youth, some intentional, some maybe not so intentional, some out of ignorance. Sometimes we betray ourselves, we can betray others, betray God, sometimes all the above. There are many forms and many manifestations of the errors we make. So most situations, or many situations, this of course also includes bad choices we made. These can be bad choices around relationships, bad choices, jobs. Sometimes these mistakes have very long-term consequences. Sometimes they're small things. But since the clock only moves forward, which means the arrow of time only goes in one direction, from the past to the present and to the future, so the most we can really expect about a past mistake is to move on, move past it. Obviously, it would be helpful to learn from it and not repeat the mistake. That story with the angel of darkness, where a guy lived his whole life a self-indulgent life and did whatever he liked. And he hurt people and abused people, everything with narcissism, narcissistic life. And finally comes up, he has his day, he finishes his life on this earth, comes up to heaven. He's standing before the heavenly court, and they list all the iniquities, all the transgressions this person perpetrated. And he had no defense, because he knew he indulged, he took care of himself, and that was it. So before they pass the verdict, they tell him to step out of the court. This is in heaven. And he's out there in the hall, so-called, in the lobby, in the celestial lobbies, bemoaning his fate. And someone comes over to him and says to him, what's going on? He says, look, I lived a life very, very indulgent. I took care of myself. I had a lot of fun, but I hurt a lot of people. And now is my day of reckoning, and it's going to be bad, because I have no real defense. So this fellow says to him, and what would you do if I can give you another chance? He says, oh, you give me another chance? That's great. What do I have to do for that? He says, you have to give me your soul. Small little thing. Sell me your soul. This was the angel of darkness speaking. Or call it the devil, Satan, or whatever name you want to call it. So he says, for my soul, you give me another chance to go back to earth? He says, yeah. But this guy was a shrewd guy. He says, okay, you know what, I'll make the deal, but on one condition. I want you to give me my memory. I don't want to come back to earth. I won't remember what I did. I'll do it all over again. So when I come back, I want to remember this moment that we're standing here, know the consequences, so that way I won't relive my life the same way. Angel of Darkness says, no problem. Pulls out a contract. He's done this deal many times. Very experienced. And it's signed, dotted line. You give me your soul, I give you back another chance in life, and this time you'll have your memory, you'll wake up in the morning, you'll remember everything that happened here. And what happens? Comes back down to earth, is reborn again, and remembers everything. And what does he do? He repeats everything again. He makes all the same mistakes. Even though he had the memory. Does it remind you of anybody? We're this way. Just because we make a mistake and we got hurt doesn't mean you're not going to do it again. Very often we do it again and again and again. It may take on a different shape. We may think we changed. But very often nothing has changed. It's just the same old story. We're humans. We're odd. We're odd creatures. I said we humans are odd creatures. All of us, not just you. Yeah. You walked in perfect timing. Don't take it personally. I mean all of us. Okay. So, we're running out of chairs, you see. So what I'm here to discuss this evening is this issue of our past. Since, as I said, the clock only moves forward, can we actually do something about mistakes we've made? And how do we look at them? Besides regretting or forgetting them, is there a method, a formula that can help us transform them, redeem them? That doesn't mean justify them, but after the fact, we do see people who have made serious mistakes in their lives and as a result turned it into major assets. It was a motivator, a catalyst for growth. So this is a theme that is obviously vital to all our lives. It addresses sometimes the uglier or darker moments of our past. And above all, teaches us that we can actually do something about it. And not just move on and pass it on. Move away from it and let it be forgotten. But actually transform it. Because it has a form of potential energy. So here's the verse I want to begin with in this week's chapter, Mishpatim, in the book of Exodus. So chapter 22, verse 2. So this is just a little introduction. This chapter talks all about, the first chapter talks really about a lot of litigation and issues of responsibility between people, honesty, theft, damages, property. So this chapter actually becomes the foundation of much of Talmudic law in the area of between human beings and their relationships, business law and so on. And much of it is actually the basis of modern constitutional law. So the different verses talk about all different circumstances of people's affecting and impacting on each other. The verses we're addressing here specifically talk about theft. So verse 1, before we get to verse 2, begins like this. Im b'machteres yimtzu haganov. If somebody comes in the middle of the night, in darkness, a thief, a ganav, and let's say you're sleeping, you hear someone in your home, God forbid, robbing you, or you don't even know, and you go and shoot the person. or in some other way hurt him, he dies. So the verse says, "Ein lo damim," he has no blood. It's a biblical way of saying that you're not responsible. So you don't consider that he had, like you killed someone, and therefore all the consequences of murdering someone, even if they were a thief, because he came at night, and you could, and therefore it's danger to you. You didn't know what this is. You went ahead, and you killed him. Obviously, we're not getting into all the nuances of the law, but this is the basic law. Then he continues, the next verse, and you'll see it's all written cryptically a bit, but it's the same idea. Im zorcha hashemesh alav. If the sun shines on this person, so as Rashi and the commentaries explain, that means that it's not by night and in darkness, but the person comes in broad daylight into your home, which means you know who it is. As Rashi brings, it's a person who is just coming to rob you. Because, for example, he gives a sad example of a father coming to rob a son. So a father that's a thief still has compassion for his son. He's not interested in killing him. So this is a person who's not afraid. You see who the person is. That means their intention is only theft. Then damim loy. Then they do have blood, and you are responsible if you kill them. In other words, you don't have the license not to kill. So the difference, of course, is because the first person come at night, you have no idea who it is, and you're danger to your life. It could be anybody. It could be someone who wants to kill you, or they'll kill you, even though it may only be a robbery. But if someone's coming in broad daylight and they allow you to see who they are, referring to somebody that you recognize, so that type of person has blood. That's the way the Torah puts it. Just give me 1 second, I just want to see one thing. Okay. Rashi, the commentary Rashi explains what it means he doesn't have blood. It's why. It's not like you killed him. It's like he himself initially was dead, because you did not know. 1 second. As I said, because you could imagine that a person coming then would be a danger to you. But the second person, I'm just reading Rashi. Yeah, because the second person is very clear that they're only coming to rob you. So here's the question. The law is a logical one, and I believe it's similar laws in the United States law. I would have to ask an attorney. I'm not really sure. But in Hebrew, the difference between the first and the second person, the first one is a ganef. Have you heard of a ganef? A ganef is usually someone who steals in hiding. And the second is a gazlan. A gazlan is someone who comes in broad daylight. But the question is this: why is the Torah used the expression, and the sun is shining on it? I mean, there are many ways to say that the person is you know who that person is, or that you know clearly that the person is not going to kill you. Why is the Torah use an expression like the sun shining on it? The Torah is a bit cryptic, but it also implies something positive, as if the sun shines on a person like that when he's clearly a criminal. So as we'll see, it's because even though crime is a crime and therefore these people are accountable, but there's something after the fact that allows a person to redeem even a crime that they have perpetrated, intentional or unintentional. So let me explain it with a very interesting analogy and story of the Baal Shem Tov. Baal Shem Tov was a great mystic. He's the founder of the Hasidic movement, 18th century. And he was known to be a person of deep, deep compassion and love for everyone. So once a woman came to see him who was a widow. She had lost her husband at a young age. And all she had left was a young little child. And this child fell gravely ill, and the doctors had given up hope. So she came to the Baal Shem Tov. Maybe the Baal Shem Tov can do something for her. Pray for this child. And she started crying to the Baal Shem Tov. It's the only child I have. It's the only thing I have in my life. No husband, no other joy. The only joy is this little child. So Baal Shem Tov's compassion and empathy was aroused. She says, let me see what I can do. So he gathered 9 what they call tzaddikim nistarim. These are the hidden tzaddikim, hidden righteous people, who are, they say there are 36 of them in every generation. They're all over the place. No one knows who they are. They may be sitting in this room right now. Let's see if anybody looks guilty when I say that. They don't let on who they are. And he gathered 9 of them together with himself to pray for this child. Well, nothing worked. It didn't help. Something felt the prayer was not really going to accomplish. So he decided, he came back, and he thought about this woman. How is he going to tell her that he can't do anything about it? He didn't feel comfortable. You know, when you're really desperate, you look for solutions. Baal Shem Tov suddenly realized he had a great idea. He asked his assistant, let's hook up the wagon and the horse. We have to go to the edge of town, to the deep woods. The wagon driver always knew, Baal Shem Tov, you never know where you're going and what you're going with. But he knew it must be an important mission, so he got everything ready. They went to start traveling. Where are they going? A place that nobody ever travels to. The wagon driver says, Baal Shem Tov, you sure you want to go? He says, yeah. Why does nobody travel here? Because this is a dangerous area. The thieves, the robbers, and all the underworld live. So it's an area everyone avoids. But Baal Shem Tov insisted, this is exactly where I want to go. As they get deeper in the forest, deeper in the woods, it's quiet. You can see places lurking with all kinds of unwanted elements, umgewünschten Elementen, as er sagt. Yeah? Level. Yeah. Versammte Mais. And finally they come to the edge of the town. Baal Shem Tov gets off the wagon. He tells the wagoner, you stay here. He says, you sure you don't want me to accompany you? You know, it's a dangerous area. Anything can happen here. Don't worry. Shem Tov goes further. And he seems to know his way around, which surprised the wagon driver. How does he know his way around? He never remember ever going here. The Baal Shem Tov seemed to know his way around, and he makes it, but goes between a few trees, goes deeper into the woods, ends up in a place where there is a whole a den of thieves, basically. And they see him. The thieves jump up. He's coming into their territory, and they're wondering, who's this guy, this man, this rabbi? I mean, he looks saintly. He's coming there. No one touched him because they didn't know what this is. They all got very frightened. And then their leader suddenly comes out from his little lair and recognizes the Baal Shem Tov and says, what are you doing here? He tells them, this is a friend. You should leave them be. What are you doing here? You're not supposed to come here. Baal Shem Tov says, I need a real big favor from you. He says, Baal Shem Tov, look, we're not going to touch you, but go home. You shouldn't be coming to a place like this. Baal Shem Tov says, no, I need something urgent, it's emergency. I wouldn't come here if I didn't need it. So the leader, the band leader says, what do you need? Tell me what you need. What can we do for you? He says, I need 9 of you. Or 10 of you, he said, actually. A minyan. I need a minyan. A minyan. We don't daven. We don't pray. What are you talking about? That's not how we make our living. He says, no, a one-time thing. I need a favor. 10 of you to come with me. You need to pray for someone who's in a very serious situation. Why are you coming to us? There's so many tzaddikim. He says, I need you. That's how it is. Well, he insisted. So this leader respected him. He said, okay, fine. He gets together with 9 guys. They're all laughing. It's ridiculous. They're going to the Baal Shem Tov to start praying. They don't pray. They're like live an exact opposite life. Okay, this old man wants them to pray, so they'll pray for a few minutes. They get together, they say a prayer for the Baal Shem Tov. He wishes them all goodbye. He thanks them from the depths of his heart. He says, "You don't know what you accomplished today." They said, "Okay, very nice." They go back, and the woman suddenly, because Baal Shem Tov goes back home, and suddenly, a while later, the woman comes running to the Baal Shem Tov. "What kind of miracle did you achieve? My child has miraculously recovered." The students of the Baal Shem Tov heard this. They said to him, "Something very weird here. Why is it that when you gathered together the 10 tzaddikim, the great men, the righteous souls, you couldn't achieve anything? You couldn't save the child. And suddenly you went to the thieves, because they had heard from the wagon driver. And here, a minion of thieves was able to get the child healed." So the Baal Shem Tov answered as follows. He said, "I saw that all the gates in heaven were locked. All the gates in heaven were sealed with lock and chain. And I needed someone to break in. The tzaddikim couldn't break in. The thieves know how to break in. That's why the thieves were able to accomplish it." So it's a cute story, but it's interesting what he's saying. That the same thieves who break into homes and break into stores or break into steal for unhealthy reasons, here suddenly, if you use it right, they're able to break through the gates of heaven where normal people can't break in because they don't know how to break into when the gates are locked. Which teaches us that there are conventional ways to do things, unconventional ways. I qualify this again. This is not a justification to become a thief. But it means that things that we may have done in the past in our lives open up doors and opportunities that had you not done them, those mistakes, you would never be able to achieve that today. This takes discipline and effort to be able to, as they say in the Talmud, to throw away the peel and preserve the fruit. Because you don't want to use the mistakes themselves or the errors as a positive. You want to take what you learn from it. So you even have an expression of one of the Chassidim says, one of the great Chassidim, what was his name? I forgot his name. Chernobyl or one of these said, "There's 7 things we learn from a thief. That if you don't succeed once, you try again." And 6 other lessons. I don't remember them all now. Huh? So why does he have to say learn from a thief? Because even negative behavior has elements that you can learn from. You don't learn from the negative stuff, but you learn from certain things that can help us in our lives. And this is a fascinating discussion because we usually like to hear about, okay, this is the way you're supposed to do things. Make a mistake, you regret, you do tshuva, and you get back on the right path. But we don't hear enough about what about those things we've learned in ways that we didn't want to learn them. We would rather not have learned them, but now that you do know, you have a way to break in, or you have a way to open up doors that someone who is more honest than you is unable to do so. So it's a very powerful theme in the idea of transforming our past. So I will now elaborate upon. So to go back now to this verse, if you think about it then in that sense, so though the Torah is not talking about it directly, the Torah means Imzar Hashem, the sun is shining on this person. The Torah is talking about a way of saying that you know who it is, or you know that the person is not coming to murder you, they're only coming to rob you. So therefore you don't have the ability, you don't have the right to just murder them. You're responsible if you do that. Whereas the other person comes in dark, you know, clearly they're hiding, which means that you don't know what they're going to do. But the reference why the sun shines on this person has a positive element to it, because even a thief can have a sun shining on the person, has some strengths that others don't have. But the key, as I said, is to discard the negative behavior and just elicit, take out from it, extract from it the positive lessons. I know people who grew up in very abusive homes. Often you hear the story that usually we do what was done to us. Many abusive people, many molesters, statistics show were molested themselves. By no means is this a justification. It's a statistic. Why? Because many things that we do, we learned from when we were in impressionable years, what was done to us. And even if there were terrible things, it just, the fact that we saw it happening makes it, I don't know the word easier, but it means that there's like that option. Tragically. But that doesn't mean that we have no choice, it just means it's more challenging. Just like children growing up in a home where there's a lot of anger, and a parent expresses themselves with anger, yelling, screaming, abusive language. Abuse is not always with physical abuse, it could also be verbal abuse. So children growing up in a home where they see that one of the parents, or both, use that as a tool, usually assimilate or assume a similar tool. Because they think it's like teaches an impressionable child. That's the way you express yourself when you're hurt or when someone touches you, you get angry. So is it easy to break that? It's not so easy to break the vicious cycle. It's doable. At the same time, you see people who do go through healing, who learn to change things that affected them in their own childhood, negative things, and you find in them sometimes a level of refinement that you won't find in a person who never had such, did not grow up in such a negative environment. Because a person who's worked on themselves has come to not take for granted and come to really revisit the root of the problems. So when they come away with growth, it's a whole different level of growth than someone who never saw those problems in the first place. In Jewish thought, in the Torah, you find the concept I'm sure you've heard of called a tzaddik and a Baal Tshuva. These words are used very loosely today. BTs, Baal Tshuva. It's not so simple, you know. A lot of people who come to Judaism or more observant later in life, they call them BTs or Baal Tshuva. Someone born into it is called a FFB, from birth. It has other acronyms that are less complimentary than that too. But both these names I absolutely abhor. I think they're distortions, and I'm just using them because they're used in culture, but I do not at all subscribe to them for many reasons. You know, it's like someone once, I remember, was at a Shabbos table with many years ago, I was a child. So my father asked a guy at the table and said, so what kind of girl are you looking for? They were talking about shidduchim. I was a kid. So he says he's not looking for a Baal Tshuva. He doesn't want a Baal Tshuva. Which means someone that... So he says, well, my friend, then you only have one choice. A Baal Avera. Which means if you're not a Baal Tshuva, which is not someone who did Tshuva, it's someone who does sins. You know. That's the opposite of a Baal Tshuva. Anyone that's familiar, even on a basic level, Jewish thought knows that Kol Yomav B'Tshuva, we're always doing Tshuva. The bigger the tzaddik, the more Tshuva they're doing. Tshuva doesn't just mean regret or repentance on sins. It means getting closer to God. And that's a process that we all are doing. How close you are, there's always more to go. But I'm not here to talk about that. The reason I mention it is because the Talmud explains the difference between a tzaddik and a Baal Tshuva. The real difference between them is, and that's why you'll see there's no other option. A tzaddik is someone who never tasted sin. So is there such a person you know? So if someone doesn't want to marry a Baal Tshuva, they're not going to find a tzaddik because there are no tzaddikim that easily around. So it's a Baal Avera. Tzaddikim is someone who never tasted sin. Who never transgressed. A person like that has not made mistakes. So they're a particular category. It's a beautiful, innocent place, but it's something not common. So the Talmud says, "B'mokim shebalei tshuva imdim, tzaddikim gemurim einim yechelim lamed sham." The place where Baal Tshuva stands, the position that he achieves, tzaddikim gemurim, not just tzaddik, not just a regular tzaddik, even a complete tzaddik, because in tzaddik itself there are levels. Even the highest level of a tzaddik cannot stand in that place, cannot reach the same spiritual status of a Baal Tshuva. The reason given for this, there are different explanations. The Alter Rebbe, the Baal Tanya, writes in chapter 7, and he talks about two types of tshuva. Well, the Talmud talks about different types of tshuva. There's a tshuva, it's called tshuva from fear. You did a mistake, and out of fear of God, or fear of punishment, or fear of consequences, you regret and you repent. So the Talmud says such a tshuva only repairs something from here on. In other words, the mistake was done, you cannot repair your past, but from here on, the tshuva has value and affects you and the rest of your life. Then there's another level of tshuva, it's called tshuva ma'ava. That's a tshuva that comes from love. Not out of fear of consequences, not out of punishment or fear of God. It comes from love. And the example he uses for this in Tanya, it's of a person, for instance, who for a long period of time spent in the desert and has not drunk water for so long that they're so parched, and so when water comes, there's such a passion to drink the water, such appreciation, because that person hasn't drunk water in such a long period of time. So it's not coming out of fear, it's coming from, because the person was deprived of something spiritual, something pure, that deprivation creates a vacuum that is so deep. So the passion and the yearning to find health and healing and light is much deeper than for a person who's sated and has drunk water or has seen the light. That type of tshuva, the Talmud says, transforms not just from here on, but also the past. Why? Because it's the thirst of yesterday that brought you to this passion today. So it's not just, oh, I made a mistake yesterday, and now I'm starting a new path, which is the first level of tshuva that comes out of fear. But one that comes out of love, it's a direct result of the hunger. It's precisely because you were in a negative place. That itself is the catalyst and the cause. That's the seed that has brought you to this great place. And then you transform the past, and it's a whole different dimension of an experience. That's called transformation of mistakes. Because the mistake has taught you what you're missing, and you appreciate it far beyond what any tzaddik could ever appreciate. So a tzaddik who's never sinned has the beauty, has the virtue of being in the light all the time, but he doesn't know what darkness is. So his connection to light is very natural. What does natural mean? It comes easily. But you're not going to see passion. He's not going to fight for it as if you're fighting for something when you're desperate. He's not desperate. He's always been there. A healthy person, psychologically, emotionally healthy, can also suffer from a certain, called complacency. Because I'm comfortable. A person who's been deprived and has not had love in their lives, or light, or water, or whatever analogy you want to use, that person is desperate. So the desperation can express itself in unhealthy ways, and then, of course, it makes the situation worse. Or the desperation can be a catalyst that makes you so thirsty that you suddenly appreciate it, and you passionately hold on to it for the rest of your life, because you know what it's like without it. You're like dead without it. And that's why b'mokim, that's the space and the status, the level that a Baal Tshuva reaches, a tzaddik can never reach, because a tzaddik can never have such passion. Because that passion can only come from when you're deprived and you're missing something. So we see from this that a person who has in some way been deprived of something, or made a mistake, or in some way been hurt, when the lessons are learned properly and the transformation, the metamorphosis is complete, that negative experience can turn into an unbelievable force for good, because it's a driving energy. Let me explain what I mean by that. Energy is energy. Even negative energy is energy. So, when a person is on a plateau, like I said, a tzaddik, certain status quo, certain complacency, there's energy there. But it doesn't have extremes because it never suffered. It never was deprived. But a person who has lived in deep pain, that's energy. The only problem is the energy is going in the wrong direction. That's why it's painful. But imagine for a moment scientifically that you can dissect, and separate the energy from the experience. You could take out all the energy that exists in pain and suffering and channel it into something positive. Imagine what the world would be like. The biggest energy we invest, as we all know, is in negative things. When you agonize, anxiety, pain, suffering, loneliness. These are powerful, powerful emotions. In many ways, much more powerful than the joys of our lives. I think statistics show that when a person loses $1,000, they feel much worse in proportion to someone who makes $1,000. It's not like making and losing is the same feeling. I think you have to make $2,000 to alleviate the pain of losing $1,000. Why that is, I'm not sure. Many theories can be posited. But it's interesting. Is it a sense of entitlement? So when we lose, we feel much worse than when you gain. You assume that, hey, I should have gained, so you don't feel so special about it. But the point is, energy in our lives has different manifestations. Negative energy is very powerful in our lives. And the only thing is, the reason that it's so hard to see it as energy is because the negativity is so consuming. You know, when you feel very depressed and don't feel any mood to go anywhere, you don't feel energetic. But that's also energy. The only difference is the energy that is imploding instead of exploding. Think of it like the black hole in physics. What's a black hole? A black hole, which nobody has ever seen, but they have extrapolated and seen spaces in outer space that is black hole or black matter or black space. There are different words for it, different manifestations. We know there's a force called gravity, right? So gravity attracts, gravity draws like a magnet things to it. Which is why when two planets get closer to each other, there's a certain gravitational pull. They affect each other. The moon affects the sun, the earth, in the tides. When we say that the change of tides is due to the moon's orbit around the earth. So different times of the month we can even predict, or different times of the day. It's all about the moon and the earth's orbit affecting each other. But there's one thing that didn't seem possible, like for example light. The light of a star. When you look up into the sky, into the heavens, you see light, you see stars. So clearly the light is coming out of the star. So Einstein came up with a theory. What happens if the gravitational pull is so powerful on a planet that it doesn't even let light escape, because it forces the light to come back, like every gravity. Like if I throw up an object right now, it's going to fall back on the ground. Light can be emitted. But let's say the gravitational pull of the Earth or the planet is so powerful, or the sun, no light can come out. The gravity is stronger than the light. So what you have then is a black hole. There's a star. It has a tremendous amount of energy, but the energy is all being drawn back instead of being emitted outward. So don't think depression or negative feelings don't have energy. They have in many ways more energy. The best proof is this. Here you can be an energetic person. You get into a depressed state. Suddenly that energetic person doesn't have the mood to wake up or to get out of the house. So what's stronger, the energy that you usually have as a natural energetic person, or the depression? Who's stronger? The depression is stronger. The only difference is one is energy that is drawing you back in, like the black hole, and the other is energy that's being emitted out there. So everything has energy, positive and negative. The concept of transforming a mistake or an error is the idea of tapping the energy that was there in that negative experience and translating it, channeling it into a positive force. Which is why people who have suffered greatly, and there are many examples. I remember reading, I'm always very touched when I read the story of John Bradshaw. Grew up in a very abusive home. His father an alcoholic. And he turned his life around. One of the great healers. Now, you don't hear about him these days too much. But back in the 70s, 80s, one of the first part of that movement called healing. And people who suffered greatly, and their dedication to healing is a direct result, they'll tell you, from their suffering. It's a way that they're redeeming what they went through. And it's a way of helping others, because in ways that only they can understand. So only someone who grew up in a home of an alcoholic parent can understand someone in a home of an alcoholic parent. I cannot. I didn't grow up in such a home. I can imagine, I can hear, I can read. You pick up information. If you're sensitive, you listen to other people who've been in that situation, so it helps you learn to advise. But it's still not the same thing. One of the powerful forces, they say, in the 12-step program is because you're sitting in a room with energy of people that have similar energy that you have. So initially, it's hard to imagine, but then when you begin to commune and connect, it has a certain power, because there's something that people who've been there can teach us something that others that have not been there cannot. The only example I find of it in my own, well, not the only, I have many examples, because we all have certain things we identify with. But I remember when my father passed away, 4.5 years ago, a little more than almost 5 years ago, it was the first time I tasted death in my life. I mean, of an immediate family member, my parent, my father. And I remember the first day when we got back from the funeral. So the people who came to see us at that same first day were all boys that had lost a father. They were the first ones to come. And they didn't plan it, it's just they happened to come. And I remember when they looked in my eyes, and I looked in theirs, no words had to be said. It was clear. They understood something, that we were now in the same unfortunate club that you can't really ever describe. And it's like being in the fire and not being destroyed. They're able to look at me in their eyes without having to say anything. I'd made many shiva calls in my life before that. But I went. It was always like pulling teeth. Who wants to go to a house of death? I'm not saying that you don't want to you want to console the people, but it's very, very uncomfortable and awkward. For me, it was always very uncomfortable. I went. People I knew, people that I felt they could be of help, say a nice word. So it's not like I didn't go, but internally I didn't feel like it. And I realized then why, because I never identified with it. I never went through it. You have two healthy parents. You don't really know. So you come and you say something, whatever it is. But once you've gone there, there's a certain awareness, I guess, and strength that only you have is because you've been through that, someone's been through that fire. It's a very powerful type of empathy that you develop. It could also be a source of problems, because a lot of people, misery loves company, so some people hang around with others that have the same suffering, and they're not tapping into that energy. But I'm talking when you are, you learn tremendous things from loss, from mistakes, even from being a thief, as I began here, a holy thief. Because you can learn things that help open up doors, or in this case, break open the gates of heaven, that only a thief can do. Because the thief has learned how to get around, how to break in. So if you can apply that only to when the gates of heaven are locked, and you don't steal from anyone else, that's a great thing. So there's a story they tell, the Alter Rebbe, the Valatanya, I mentioned Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi. She had a chavrusa. He had a partner in learning. His partner was the son of the Maggid of Mizrich, whose name was Avram Hamalach. He was called Avram the Angel, because he lived an ascetic lifestyle. He's very, very separated himself from all materialism. He's a very sublime and very spiritual soul. Anyway, Rabbi Avram Hamalach, they used to study together. And the Maggid of Mizrich made this chavrusa, this partnership. So Rabbi Shneur Zalman would teach Avram Hamalach Talmud, Nigla, as they say, the revealed part of Torah. And Avram Hamalach, the angel, angelic one, would teach the Alter Rebbe Pnimis Torah, the inner Torah, the esoteric secrets, Kabbalah, mysticism. Because Rabbi Avram Hamalach was so ecstatic when he was teaching, he was very, very emotional about it and very taken, being such a passionate soul. So the Alter Rebbe, what he did was, they say, he would turn, I'm sorry, I should add, the way they learned was they learned an hour. First, the Alter Rebbe learned with him an hour of the Talmud. I don't know if the same day, but it was an hour. So these two, they would meet twice, or whether it was twice a day or twice a week, I'm not sure. But each one gave the other an hour, and they studied, this one studied Talmud now. When Rabbi Avram Hamalach would get into teaching the mysticism, and he was so passionate about it, the Alter Rebbe, when he didn't notice, would turn the clock back. So you'd have more than an hour with him. And later the Alter Rebbe said, though that extra time was the sweetest of all. And he used an expression, Mayim Gnuvim Yimtaku. Stolen waters are the sweetest. So that's thievery too. You could say, how could a great mystic, a great Rebbe, steal? Yes, it's true. He didn't steal money from him. He didn't steal property from him. He didn't steal his mind, didn't cheat him, he didn't fool him. But there's an expression that there, like I said, holy thieves. There is a certain type of theft that in holiness has a space to it, has a lesson to it. This is not a license to thieve. Halavai may be that the only theft we should ever perpetrate is the one of stealing extra time in study. But the point is that our life experiences, especially sometimes the ones that are not so positive, have a great energy to teach us things and methods that we would never have known had we not been in that type of place. It's a very, very unbelievable message and lesson, and I want to apply it to one example. I've shared this with you probably. So you've all heard of of LSD, right? Right. And we live in a generation, I don't know about you, I've never tasted that world, but last generation, where the drug culture, is something that's very much part of people's growing up. In the 60s, it was a very serious part of spiritual exploration. Psychedelic experiences came together with drugs and music and rock and roll and sexual revolution. So there are many people that I know that their spirituality was born through alternative foreign substances. And before that, they simply had no connection to anything religious or godly, and it was that brought that to them. Similar also to many who found spirituality through Far Eastern disciplines, like Zen Buddhism and so on. And it's a big question that's asked to me all the time. I grew up Jewish, let's say, as an example. My Jewish education was absolute disaster. Learned nothing. They wanted me to bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah, so I did some prerequisite lessons. It meant nothing to me. And as I grew older, my soul was fed and nourished through different means that have nothing to do with Judaism. Maybe were actually antithetical to Jewish thought. And what do I do with that? That's where I discovered God. That's one example of the story. And then in general, when we talk about people who grow in their lives, so you have, let's say you grow up in a home or environment which wasn't very exciting, and then later you experience things that are so-called more freeing, but it came with a price. Different exploration, mistakes people make, but as a result, that opened you up. And now you're wiser. What do you do? What do you do with that type of past? So some rabbis may say, such a past, you ignore it, you discard it, and it's like you're now a new person. Forget about it. Now you keep Shabbos, you eat kosher, you found it through Judaism. So the fact that something happened yesterday, 5 years ago, 20 years ago, forget about it. Some will even go a further extreme. It's like you're a new personality. All that is completely not you any longer. Is that really true? Is that possible? I was counseling once a couple who both became, I don't like to say Baalei Tshuva as I said, but they both became observant later in life. They're having a lot of problems. And they mentioned something to me that I thought was really well said by another counselor they went to. Told them, you think you did Tshuva? You both eat kosher today, once you didn't eat kosher. You both keep the Sabbath, you didn't keep the Sabbath. You both preserve the laws of family purity, you didn't do that. Behaviorally, you have changed your lives. But the personalities that you had then, you still have today. Don't think just because you put on a yarmulke or you keep Shabbos, suddenly your personality is a Shabbos personality. You're still who you are. You're still your father's son and mother's son, and you're still your father and mother's daughter. Personality is, it says, now you have to begin the work of tshuva in your personality to become a different type of person. And don't think just because hiding behind, I don't say hiding, but doing a mitzvah suddenly means that that you become more refined, more sensitive? Not necessarily. You could be exactly the same person before, the same selfish person. Now you're a selfish person putting on film. Then you were a selfish person that didn't put on film. You're a selfish person that eats cholent, and then you didn't eat cholent. So there's the element of integrating with your personality. That's the real work. And I thought it was really a very profound insight, an excellent insight. And it's vital to know this, that we come with our past. There's no such thing as cold turkey. You know, think of it like this. You're a child, you grow up, whatever type of home, environment. Let's say you come to some revelation in your life. You discover something new, you want to grow. And you completely feel that the past of your life was really not something that was healthy. You want to make a break from it. Okay, you make a break. But remember that the psyche and the genetic elements of that personality go with you even though you break a break. So to completely ignore it as if it doesn't exist is really almost like a lobotomy, trying to cut away a part of your personality that was there before you're here, where you are now. So then the question is, so what do you do? Then how are you stuck in your past? If you don't make a complete clean break, what do you do? The answer is, my friends, is what I said earlier. There's energy there that you have to learn to extract. I'm not suggesting you remain who you are, but that personality that you are is still there and will always stay with you, and you want to free yourself. You want to free that energy, not ignore it. You have to learn how to take the fruit and discard the peels, right? So here's the example I wanted to give you. There's many examples. I'm using them interwoven here. This class, many years ago, a guy came to the end of the class, and he clearly was high on something. I knew him. And he said, Rabbi, I want to ask you a question. He was very loud and loose. When I was bar mitzvot, and I went through a semi-observant home, but at basically age 17, 18, I dropped the whole thing. I went off and I discovered God not through Judaism, but as he put it, through LSD. And then one year, and I had left all of Judaism behind. One day, years later, I was flying on a plane from Los Angeles, the West Coast to the East Coast. And he said, I dropped some acid, this is the way he said it. And especially on the plane, it's always a great experience looking out there with the clouds, vibrating, and the colors and the shapes. And in the middle of the plane ride, I hear a familiar voice. In the back of the plane, there was a group of Jews davening, praying. And they said, Kodesh, Kodesh, Kodesh. No, it means holy, holy, holy. So I jumped up, I went to the back, I felt, he says, the angels, the celestial angels all around me. I saw the chariot, I saw the throne in his psychedelic vision. And I put on tefillin for the first time in many years, and after that I began to slowly move back to Judaism that I had grown up with. So what do you think about that? It's LSD that brought me back to Judaism. What do you think? And everybody was sitting and listening. I wanted to know whether I'm going to endorse this this method. So after all the prerequisite jokes that he should go to OU or OK to get a hechsher, to get a kosher rabbinate, not to me. I'm not going to be giving him a stamp of approval. So I said to him, and it was a very good question, I thought. I don't know where he was coming from, but I thought it was a good question because it's a good example. So you have rabbis or teachers who will say, God forbid, chas v'shalom, how could you have taken LSD and tell me you can't mix God and LSD, they don't mix together. Some will say, impossible. They won't even be able to identify with this. There are others, called more progressive rabbis, I guess, who will say, hey, there are many paths to God, many paths, they all lead to Rome. Some do it through Judaism, some through Buddhism, some through LSD, some through mushrooms, some through other experiences. But I'll tell you what my answer to you, I said, and I said it to everybody, was, there's a thing called growing through your past, discarding the peels and extracting the fruit. My response to you is, imagine a person who falls into a comatose state, God forbid gets into an accident, let's say, and is in a deep coma. And all the doctors have given up hope. And there's, whatever they try doesn't work. So one doctor finally says, listen, this guy's going to die from atrophy or whatever. Let's try a massive injection of drugs, just to shake up the system. You'd never give a normal, healthy person, because it would kill them. But here, there's no choice. Let's do something to shake this guy up. So the doctors agreed to do it. And it comes out of the coma. Would you ever say that this is the method to use to find health? You'd say, no, a person's in a coma, no choice. Sometimes things like that may work. So maybe God, in his mysterious ways, saw a generation that would go into a spiritual coma, and a corrupt and bankrupt Jewish education system. So he planted in crazy places all kinds of reminders or so-called medications. I don't know if that's the right word, but ways that you may find it through the back door. But never would you give it to a healthy person, and never would it be condoned or endorsed. It was like an alternative, because there's no choice. But once you've gone out of the coma, obviously you don't go and keep taking those drugs every day. It was only for extreme measures, and only in a situation where of life and death, threat to life and death. The thing that I was making the point was that the key here is, we don't invalidate a person's past. What drove a person to desperate measures, to attempt to find something to soothe or to relieve existential pain of a soul, no one ever can invalidate a person's search. What they did to alleviate that pain, or what they did to fulfill that vacuum, may have been not a healthy thing. But you have to know what to validate, what to invalidate. Just to blanketly invalidate that whole thing is invalidating a person's hunger. So if somebody, for instance, drank in a state of deep hunger or thirst, drank something really destructive, because they were so desperate, they just took something and it burned half of their stomach. So you can invalidate what they did, what they drank, but you can never invalidate the thirst. And often you find that people who are not sensitive to the nuances sometimes invalidate a person, everything. The person, their experience, their hunger, everything, as if, oh yeah, I can't hear that. It's not the truth. You have to be able to be sensitive to a person's space and realize that there's a distinction between how they fill the need and the need itself. The need and desire for transcendence, for deeper meaning, for soulfulness, whatever it is a profound and very healthy need in all human beings. The fact that some of us don't find it in healthy ways, maybe due to some mistakes we made. And sometimes we fill it in very destructive ways. I spoke recently to a group of teenagers. Tough teenagers, they're going through their challenges. And I asked me to speak to them. I said to them, what do you think is your worst enemy? So this one said drugs, and this one said sex is unprotected sex, and they gave a whole list of stuff, of all kinds of enemies they have. So I said, you know what I think is the biggest enemy of a person, especially a young person? Boredom. Because all the things you're saying are not the root of the problem. That's how you go reach it, and if you don't do it right, you can get a guy can OD on drugs or some other thing that could be extremely destructive. But why did you go there in the first place? Because you were hungry. You're thirsty. You're desperate. You're bored. You're looking for a high. You're empty. So you're looking for something. If it was healthy, you wouldn't have a problem with that. You're not looking for something unhealthy. You're looking for something to alleviate, in some way subdue the search. So you do whatever comes easy to you. Drugs are easy. Other things are also easy. Instead of in a disciplined way, or so on and so forth. And these are teenagers, like 16, 17, 18-year-olds. And they nodded, they all agreed. But you never think of the boredom. Because boredom is not like very exciting. You think of like once you're in trouble already. But there's always a root. So there's a deep emptiness. Well, let's put it this way. The soul is a ravenous voice, a ravenous force. that wants something. And if you're not getting it one way, you're going to get it another way. So when you, let's say, have grown through that, and now you're an older person, you've gone back to your life, you say, okay, what are the different things I did with my life? How did I act out? And this can be in any area. Whether it's some things I mentioned here, whether it's in the area of sexuality, where everybody has got some type of history, for good or for bad, often plenty of stuff that we're embarrassed of, or, and so on. But you have to distinguish between the experiences and the root of what brought you to those experiences. The root is always a healthy one. It's a desire, it's a will, it's a craving, a hunger or thirst for something. So when you grow through it, what you want to do is extract the energy of that hunger and discard, as I said, the peel, which is how you satisfy. Excuse me. So the thief, for instance, the thief is also looking for something. He unfortunately found methods that are not the right methods, illegitimate ones. But as a result, he's become a very ingenious person. He finds ways to break in where others can't find a way to break in. Imagine channeling that into creative energy. He'll come up with ideas that regular people won't come up with. So just don't channel into stealing from others, but channel it into helping others. A person like that can come up with brilliant methods. Of course, it's easier, instant gratification, to channel your strengths into immediate gain. But the things you've learned in that situation, that desperate situation, are tremendous assets. And that's called transforming the past. So a person who's been very, very thirsty, as I said, and then they come to appreciate water, their appreciation is far beyond someone who's never been thirsty. The challenge then is not to lose that appreciation. Often people, once they get the water, they forget where they came from. I've seen this often. People who've grown up in a certain environment that was very unhealthy or abusive or so on, then once they find healing, or they, let's say, become more observant, they're very judgmental of others that were like they were, which always strikes me weird. A person like that should be very sensitive to someone that came from a certain past. And I see often they're very judgmental, like they're impatient. And I point it out sometimes to people, and I realize the reason for it is because they're really being impatient with themselves. They see that person in them, and they say, I came there, and they forget how painful, or how, let's call it, how dark it was in that world. Those that maintain and remember how thirsty they were, and don't just take it for granted, become extremely empathetic, and they can relate. Those are people who have a lot of humility, and become excellent counselors. The best advice you'll ever get from somebody is the advice of someone that's in your situation, that was once in your situation, and grew through it. Whenever people come to me, I always look to find someone that was, it's never exactly the same situation, but people who have similar, because there's nothing like the credibility and the lessons and the depth of knowledge you learn from people who've been in similar situations to you, which itself is not so easy to accept, because many of us think that we're unique in our suffering. The truth is, you're not unique in suffering. We all suffer the same way. We're unique in our strengths, not in our weaknesses. One part of weaknesses, it makes you think that you're unique with your weaknesses, so you hold on to them for your dear life, because that's like what makes you special. But that's part of the problem. So, once you come through that, and you go to someone, you meet someone that's been where you are, like let's say you're in this place in the road, and that person is now here, and they remember when they were there in that section, those are the best friends you'll ever be able to, the best friends that you should hold on to for your dear life, because they've been there, and there's a credibility. When they tell you you can get through it, it's not like someone who's not been there to tell you to get through it, because you could always say, hey, you've never been where I've been, so it's easy for you to be optimistic and hopeful and so on. But someone who's been there, you can't tell them that. They were there, and they did get through it. So there are many ways to redeem that past of a person's life, and I mentioned several of them. And there are methods to do so. The first step, as I said, is to really distinguish between the two parts, between the peel and the fruit. You have to be able to recognize where the energy is and how the energy was misused. Then the question is, how can you take that same energy and use it properly? It sounds good on paper. The difficulty is the habit. If you're constantly using it a certain way, it's not easy to suddenly rechannel it. But it's definitely doable. It requires a lot of awareness and willpower. And once you channel it, it's an unbelievable experience because you are not deprived at all. It's the same person. You'll see it's you, the healthy version. People who are passionate, you'll find passionate people can always be passionate in two extremes, in terrible things and in very good things. A passionate person is a passionate person. There's no such thing as a passionate person who's only passionate in negative things, and then when it comes to positive things, they're not passionate. You have passion, you have passion. The thing is that, however, that often that passion has been released, or you're accustomed to releasing it in ways that are not necessarily so healthy. Kol hagadol mechavere, the Talmud says, yitzre gadol mimenu. The greater the person, the greater the yetzer hara, the evil inclination, the challenges that they have. Because someone who has greatness in them, whatever it is that you're great in, someone who has great strengths, it can go both ways. Great strengths, let's say someone who's very smart. Someone's very smart can also be very manipulative. Because they see ahead, they're able to understand others better than they understand, than they're understood. They know how to maneuver. They have a lot of tools at their disposal. But if they use their smartness with humility, they can actually be a great asset. They can help people get to great places. I mentioned this many times here. This guy that I met who was for many years a therapist. And then I meet him one day. He used to come to the class when he was a therapist, not nowadays. He became an advertising executive. That's when he stopped coming. So I said, how'd you move from therapy to advertising? He says, I'm doing the same thing, but I'm getting paid 10 times as much. Same thing? Like what? He says, then I was helping people deal with their emotions. Now I'm helping manipulate their emotions. So he's using his whole psychological knowledge now in advertising, and he's a brilliant guy, so he's doing it well. And then I said to him, okay, so then around 10 years from now, when you feel a little guilty, you can retire and become a therapist and heal all the people you made crazy. You know. It's like the radar detectors and the radars are manufactured by the same companies. So they manufacture a great radar, and then they manufacture for the cops a great radar detector, and then they come back to you and say, well, it's like, who are the lawyers, the best lawyers getting tax loopholes? People who worked at the IRS, vice versa. So it's like a vicious cycle of the cat and mouse. They both come from the same origins. So, strengths we have, many of them, they all go, a strength goes always, remember, a strength is neutral, it's amoral. How will you use your intelligence? There are people who use their intelligence in most destructive and horrendous ways. To hurt people, to manipulate people, to pit people against each other. And there are people who use their intelligence to help people. Same things with sensitivity. You could think, hey, being a sensitive person doesn't necessarily mean you're using it for the right things. Being a sensitive person can also be very selfish. You know how to relate to someone else. You know how to manipulate their emotions. You know how to get into somebody's heart. And you can hurt them too. So, all these virtues, so to speak, are energy. They're forms of energy. They can go one way or the other. When we look back in our past lives, the past of our lives, and the things we may have done wrong, there's always an energy in anything you did wrong. Remember, anything that you did serious had a lot of energy in it. And with this energy, there's always power and growth. The challenge is how you channel it. How you channel the thief and make the thief a thief of Kedusha, so to speak, a holy thief. Someone who learned to maneuver or learned to figure out creative ways how to break into a protected home is also someone that can learn how to break through the gates of heaven in innovative ways. So there are strengths that each of us have that may have been misused, may have been abused, may have been misappropriated in our earlier years. The mistake is to think that you have to annihilate or silence that energy. It's not correct. There may be a stage of discipline where you need to so-called calm down, or another word I want to use. lower the flames of that passion for you to be able to grow. But ultimately the goal is rechanneling, taking that same energy and channeling it towards something positive. Examples are endless, in truth. Endless, literally endless. And I speak for myself. I know my own strengths. I know how they can be used in very negative ways. Tools of communication, writing or teaching and so on are obviously great strengths, but when they're not used for the proper purpose, they can become very, very manipulative tools, ego trips, arrogance, and ultimately people can get hurt in the process. You'll find many people who are spiritual mentors, and unfortunately they fall into a trap of becoming predators. Henry Kissinger said, I think, that power is the greatest aphrodisiac. When people are empowered, there's a certain power to it. There's when people come to you and you are a person who can counsel. Why is it the worst type of abuse when a therapist or a rabbi or a confidant abuses a person's confidence? Is because you open yourself up to that person's strength. You open yourself up, there's always a lot of vulnerability there. And a person uses their strength that you come to for advice and they use it to exploit you. That is very, very extremely destructive because it's coming from power. But that same power is also the power of healing. So it's interesting how every force has like a zelu umazeh. It's like has a mirror image of being used in a positive way or in a negative way. It's how it is with all power. It works in that fashion. In medicine too, homeopathy is built on the principle of taking the core of the germ and using it against itself. Even antibiotics is based on that principle. The Talmud puts it this way, Meneo be Abba Lishde be Narga. I'll explain what that means. In Aramaic it means that in order to cut down a tree, you need a tree to cut down a tree. So an axe is made from a tree that it cuts down. The axe, the handle of the axe. The Talmud uses it to explain why among the different prophecies, the prophets, in the books of prophets, we have a prophet called Avadja. His prophecy is the greatest prophecy of all. He talks about the Messianic age in the highest terms. So the Talmud says Avadja was a ger. He was a convert to Judaism. So why of all the prophets is the person who converted from grandchildren of Esav, why is he the one that prophesies the greatest prophecies, greater than Isaiah the prophet, greater than Jeremiah, greater than Yecheskel? So the Talmud rather says, uses this analogy, because Meneo be'aba lishda be'narga. If you want to transform the world, you need something made from the world to transform it. Since he came from the nations of the world, he has the power to help transform those nations into a divine force. So his prophecy will be much more powerful than the prophets that, like I mentioned before, like the Baal Tshuva is more powerful energy than the Tzaddik. The other prophets were born in holiness, you can say, or born in the word holiness. They were born into it. He came to it, and because he came to it through his hard work, what he knows, only he can know, because he comes from the world that he can transform. So essentially the formula goes that if you want to transform something, you need something that was there. Just as I said earlier, people that will identify with you most, or you'll identify with them, are people who were in the journey like you've been to that journey. That is the ultimate power of transformation. So to go back to the verse here, the sun shines on everyone, even on the most negative type of experience, even on a burglar, on a thief, because there's something that person has gone through that only that person has learned. The challenge that they have is how do they, as I said, channel that experience into a positive one. So the Torah, even when it's referring so-called to the negative of the consequences of a thief, who comes at night, who comes in the day, excuse me, even when emphasizing that, there's an element of shining of the sun. So to go back to the story of the Baal Shem Tov, holy thieves, yes, they have the power to break through that others do not have the power. I've seen as I mentioned before, children who grew up in particular environments, especially if you're growing up, let's say, if someone grew up in an insecure or unhealthy home. A person like that has many challenges to overcome. But there's a certain strength that you build up in a home like that. And I'm by no means justifying it. I'm just saying it after the fact. One of the strengths is vigilance. A person like that is always vigilant, often to their detriment. They're always, like their antenna is always up. Because when you grew up in a home where you did not know whether love will be coming from your mother and father that night, as a little child, because they may be angry, they may be abandoning you, they may be gone, they may be drunk or whatever, and what happens is you become ultra sensitive because you're constantly looking for the enemy. People like that grow up, are extremely sensitive, much more sensitive to others than to every person, every nuance. I only learned this the hard way in a way when I remember speaking to someone who grew up in a home like that, and I remember lifting my hand like this, just like that, and this person flinched, like as if I was going to slap her. And all I did was this, and I realized at that moment that this person was hyper vigilant about everything. She was constantly, her antennae were always up. Because she, as a young child, could not afford. It's like being in a battle zone. You can't afford to put your guard down. She become hyper vigilant, extremely sensitive to body language, extremely sensitive to other people's movements. As I said, to the extreme. Because every one of us should be able to kick off our shoes and just be calm, relax, and not always feel that we're in a war zone. But a person like that, if they learn to channel it, has a deep sensitivity that you will not find in others. They know how to read faces much better, because they had to read their mother's face or father's face all the time to figure out where the hell their parent is. So just as an example of things that develop when you're deprived of one thing, something else develops in its stead. The key, of course, is to find balance and ways to channel it. I'm just using that example. There are many, many examples that I'm sure you can come up with in your own life of things that were very negative or very unhealthy or whatever word you want to use, mistakes we made. If you really look at it, you will find that you have a uniqueness that you developed. And the key is not to repeat it, obviously, but more importantly, to channel that uniqueness in healthier ways. I can go on with this theme, but I think I got the point across. And it really comes down to each of us applying this to our own personal lives, because we have different situations. In a group like this, in general a group, it's impossible to be very customized, because we all have our unique situations. So though I'm talking some way generic, but at the same time there's a way to talk about generic things that are also customizable, let's put it this way. Because there's certain principles that if you apply them, you could discover how to apply this to your own life. So, as a practical exercise, here's what I think, since we all braved the storm and came out here. It would be a good way to begin, and it's not easy necessarily, is to write down on a piece of paper, something you're struggling with, some past mistake that still haunts you, that affects you. Often, if you think you can't find one easily, just think of the word relationships. I'm sure you'll find plenty, a long list of mistakes, so to speak, or regrets. The reason I say it is because, not to make you feel bad, I'm not suggesting to do this in case you're particularly fragile state of mind, but when you have some strength, because what it does is it helps you, if you can go back at your initiative, at your pace, and look at it, and think of a mistake, and think of the positives and the negatives that you brought into it. For example, you may have loved too much. You may have been naive and just let yourself be exposed and just come so much into it when it should have been paced more, because the other person wasn't ready, wasn't there yet. So there's a positive and a negative in that. The positive, of course, is that you have the passion. The negative was you didn't know how to temper it, to channel it. It's like the gas without the brakes. Or sometimes the other way around, that you didn't know when to let go, and you kept being in control or trying to stay above it, or not want to be vulnerable or hurt. That too comes with something. It means that you're protecting something. You're a sensitive person. Maybe you've been hurt. Maybe you don't want to be hurt. You're insecure. I'm not saying this in a negative way. I'm just saying it's a way of looking at who you are and trying to understand its strength and how it can manifest in a weak way. But never think of it like you're a bad person or a good person. It doesn't work that way. It's good energy may be used in bad ways. Or good energy channeled in wrong ways out of ignorance, out of fear, out of misunderstanding. And when you look at yourself in that way, you'll be able to look at yourself, and you could really begin to see yourself in a different way than you think. It's not black and white. It's not like, oh, those things are mistakes, and here's the good things I did. It doesn't work that way. Every mistake has good things in it. Or else it wouldn't have been a mistake, or else you wouldn't have done it. Why'd you go there in the first place? Because there's some energy there. The question is where it ended up. But because we're so subjective and so affected by it, it's hard for us to distinguish. You just remember it was a mistake, and that was it. That relationship was a mistake, or that situation was a mistake. It's not true. There's no such thing. You went into it, the same you that is now trying to deal with it also went into it. Do not invalidate yourself as if you completely made the wrong move. Yes, was it the wrong person? Even that may not have been a mistake. It may be the wrong approach. Maybe the time was wrong. Maybe there was something in that person you saw, and then there were other things going on. But to just turn this into a black and white, wrong, right, is absolutely wrong. That's absolutely wrong. So that means you have to figure out to separate. And this is for our own welfare. It's for our own growth. Because then you can begin to relate to things. I see people who made big mistakes and they just don't want to go there. That's it. They're really doing themselves a big disservice because there's a lot there that they need for them to move on. But they're afraid to go there because it's so fraught with all the negative stuff. It's like going back to a home or a building that you once lived that had terrible experiences. It's very terrifying to go back there because it just brings up the worst. But then when you do finally build the courage, you go back there, you say, hey, in this closet there was something I liked. Here's something, you begin to redeem that which was positive. This doesn't mean you have to force it and just go back to wherever you're frightened of. But remember that there's a whole picture to everything, and everything has many more levels than we think they do. And that's why when you find expressions like in the Talmud, Gamzu L'Tova, this too is for the good. Or even things that don't appear positive end up being positive. It's not some euphemism, a nice cute thing, everything is for the good. It's not what it means. It means there's some things that are not so good. But there's something in it. Somewhere there's a seed, a kernel, that if you know how to extract, can be transformed to major good. Do we want initially to go there? No. Obviously, you try to go to healthy places, stay where it's healthy. But the fact is, in life, in its twists and turns, we're going to end up sometimes stuck in a place, sometimes a situation that we cannot get into, we cannot get out of. Talk about the snow. I remember a woman told me that she went to a convention in Detroit, Michigan. There was a big snowstorm, a blizzard. They couldn't fly back to New York, so they called the Rebbe's office to let him know. And the expression they used was that we're stuck here in the airport in Detroit. And the Rebbe's answer was, I never heard of a person that's stuck anywhere. That's a victim speaks that way. You're not stuck. You're there. That means there's something there for you to do, to redeem, to free. I remember when my father was in the hospital, it was Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, 1989. So I went by the Rebbe for a blessing he gave me a piece of lekach, which is like honey cake for the new year, a blessing for a new year, and gave me a piece of cake for my father, and said to me, tell your father, he was in the hospital, he said to him, tell him that he should finish the mission for which he was sent there, so then he could be released. Which was interesting, I told it to my father. Which means, but you could think, what do you mean? He's there because he's ill, he has a mini stroke. That's why he's there. That's the technical reason why he's there. There's a deeper reason. No one is ever stuck anywhere. There's always something positive. It may be the patient right near you, maybe a doctor, maybe someone you have to meet. Why it had to happen that way, we will not understand God's mysterious ways. But there's no such thing as a negative without a positive. We prefer to have only positives in our life, but that's not going to happen. We will have some negatives. And the greatest thing is to be able to redeem a positive from a negative, meaning a positive energy coming out of a negative situation. Because that makes you strong. It doesn't mean you have to avoid, in other words, painful situations. You learn to free energy even from difficult challenges. So we all have the thief in us. We all have that type of thief. But the question is whether we're going to use it for holy purposes or for unholy ones. And that's a challenge each of us has. So this week, the power we get from this week's chapter is to do exactly that. and everybody should have the power to do so, and turn to friends and others that can support our efforts. It's always great to find someone that is in the same place. As I said, one of the greatest things in life is to find someone who was there before you, who went through it. Sometimes it's an older person. Be amazed to find time to have a conversation with a grandmother or a grandfather, or someone older in general, and you find that they were once in the place that you are, and their wisdom and experience is tremendous because they've been there and they made it through. It gives confidence, and it knows you can make it. So, I have all the confidence in all of you, and I hope you have it in me as well. And ended up being all right here. Pretty good that we came out here in this class. Some of you called whether we're having the class. As I said, MLC never sleeps, so we're always make sure we come every Wednesday. I come every Wednesday night. And so till next Wednesday night, I want to bid everybody a good night. Enjoy. I personally I turn into a little child in this type of winter wonderland, the snow. At least till it begins getting grimy and dirty, so we can still appreciate the whiteness dropping down to us from heaven. It's like an equalizer. At least for a few hours, it makes us feel that the world can be a little whiter than we think. So enjoy it. I shall enjoy it, and everyone have a great night. I believe Philip will be giving his class tomorrow at 7 o'clock here, and it's always an honor, a pleasure to sit with you, to travel together in this spiritual journey that we take. Please see me as a friend in any possible way. What else can I say? Everyone have a very pleasant week. Thank you.